you've written books, very well received, well regarded, well sold, awesome books about the UFO phenomenon, but you've also written for Scientific American Popular Science, which are very obviously well regarded within the academic community. What got you into UFOs? What got you into the phenomenon as a subject?
Good question. Always a good
Thank
first
you.
question, also, because everybody's story is so interesting. Mine probably least of all. But
Oh,
I've been interested in astronomy and space stuff since I was a super little kid, very young, and always interested in aliens in general, but never really thought about UFOs very much, honestly, until 2017, as I'm sure your listeners are very familiar with the big New York Times article that came out at the end of
yes.
2017 about the Pentagon's UFO research program. And I got an assignment to kind of follow up on that. And then, as I'm sure you well know, once you start down the rabbit hole, you have to go all the way down the rabbit hole. So
Yeah.
I just jumped in. Yeah.
I always say, yeah, I mean, it's the only game in town, I think, intellectually. It's like once you kind of hear like this is real, there's something to this, it's so fascinating. It's like you can't stop wanting to learn about it.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, there's only so many true mysteries left in the world, and when you find one, it's fun too. I think one of the things that most stuck with me from researching was that someone said they're the ultimate problem to try to solve, just because you can kind of keep going and keep asking questions forever,
Yeah.
probably. Which, if you're a curious person, is ideal, even if you never find the answers.
Yeah. That's so true. Since I was a kid, I was like you. I was fascinated with. I was like a. I went to film school ultimately, so I have no real skills. I grew up kind of like doing the artsy side, but loved science, math, and that world, but just didn't see myself as being, I guess, able to do it. Now I'm trying to learn about it, but I had loved UFOs since I was a kid, and yeah, it feels like you never really like you study it and learn a bunch about it, but you never really feel like you know a lot about it. Like there's just yeah, it's like a rabbit hole. Yeah, it just goes forever.
Mhm.
Although
Yeah, and I mean, I do. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, I was good. You go. Yeah, I
Oh,
just
oh, I was
ramble.
just gonna say that, I think that the sciences, and the UFO topic both need perspectives from people in different fields, like film or whatever. And I would say, film has had probably the biggest cultural influence on what people think about UFOs of anything else. So I think it all kind of contributes, whether or not you're sitting in a lab doing research. So I wouldn't say it's useless.
Have you been
Hmm.
following the DC stuff, like the hearings, the Gillibrand stuff? There's that guy, Congressman Burchett, is his name, the Republican who's always like going off. Are you following that?
A little bit, kind of on the margins. But if you want to catch me up on the details, we could talk about the details.
Totally, yeah. I'm a nerd. I watch it all. And what's fascinating
Perfect.
is there almost is not a lot of details. It's like it's weird. To me, it's almost like soft confirmation or slow disclosure because it's like they're having a meeting about stuff, but then there is still I've heard it now a couple of times. People bring it up. Sean Kirkpatrick or Dr. Kirkpatrick, he's the head of Arrow, which I don't know if you know, it's like the
Mhm.
whatever UFO Pentagon office. And he kind of had this quote he said at the beginning of the hearing. He said, I just want to say we haven't seen anything that, like, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, indicates ET or indicates a violation of physics or stuff that we already know. And then it was just kind of a lot of the hearing was just like, it's taken a long time. I don't have a lot of money, but I have like tens of millions or I think a couple $100 million. And it just seemed almost a little bit like the 1950s. They were slow dragging it. At first, I didn't think anything about it, but the last couple of people I've had on, they've all kind of brought it up and thought it was strange. Um,
Mhm.
and so it was like there wasn't a lot of movement made. There was like a little video they released where it's that I don't know if you saw this metal sphere. It was like over Mosul, Iraq. It's like a military
Yeah, I did
plane.
see that one.
Yeah, and it's like
Yeah.
3 seconds or whatever. But again, it was kind of contradictory because he's like, we haven't seen anything that's yada yada, blah blah blah. He's kind of poo-pooing it. He's like, I have no money, no team, even though they just gave him all this money. And then he's like, here's a video of a weird metal balls or Warzone. Uh,
Right.
you could
Mhm.
just tell the power, like the behind the scenes. I got the sense of like there's just some people don't want to talk about it or are scared. I think of I can hear myself in the monitor. I sound like such a allergy surfer stoner guy. I think there's a deference or deference to the executive branch. Like they don't want to. It seems like everyone's kind of America seems so authority based and sort of like this military and political hierarchy. They always like I don't know if you remember those classified balloon hearings when like Senator Blumenthal came out after and he was like
Yeah,
Biden
I
should
do.
speak on this and yada yada. And he said if he doesn't, we'll say something. But he still didn't say anything. It's like, well, say something now. You're on TV, you know. But there's just this deference, this American thing. It totally makes sense. It's cool to the president. I think they're always like leaving it up to him. But I wonder, I don't know. I just wondered if that was part of the Kirkpatrick reticence to be like, we haven't seen any ET stuff. We haven't seen anything that violates the laws of physics. Because then Gillibrand was kind of like trying to hold his feet to the fire a little bit. Um, and she was like, "Have you put out any tweets?" And he was like, "One. We've done like one tweet, and we don't have the website up yet." And I don't know, it just seemed kind of like high schooly. I don't know. Sorry, I'm babbling.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I mean, you bring up a number of good points. First of all, I think that, that it is like the 50s or the maybe the early 60s also, where this is getting this kind of public and governmental play, like becoming a topic that you can watch on C-SPAN in the first place is kind of a pretty big change from recent years and kind of
Yeah.
does harken back to that part of the 20th century. And also, I think it's interesting that all over, people like us and then also the politicians all kind of talk about the UFO phenomenon like there will be one answer, like what is going on up there, when in reality there's probably lots of answers and maybe some of them
Yeah.
are deeply strange and some of them are drones, and like all of those things can be true at once, which I feel like kind of gets lost in those hearings sometimes, maybe.
Yeah, no, you're
You know what I
totally
mean?
right. It reminds me twofold of like on the one point you made of it reminds me a little bit of the 50s when I hope it's not like 20, 30 years from now, people aren't talking on a podcast of like this time period and being like we would in the 50s where they would do that dance of like they almost released it and they didn't. And then they would say, because it seems like it's always like 1 foot forward, 2 steps back a little bit. And I always wondered if some of that was
Mhm.
to not break society or to not freak people out. So they would always kind of give them an out if people started to panic or whatever.
Can I ask you a question about something you just said?
Yes, please.
I'm curious if you think that people would freak out and society would break itself if we got some kind of far out revelation about what UFOs are. Let's say we found like some kind of proof that they didn't come from Earth. Do you think that society would fall apart and people would go crazy? Or what do you think would
Uh,
happen?
no, in the old days, I do. Now, after COVID, not so much. I think that was such a catalyzing or like such a huge, tumultuous, disruptive event for society. I think there's like the funny
Mhm.
meme I'm sure you've seen where the alien comes down and he's like, "Aren't you surprised?" And the guy's like, "I got a lot going on right now." And he's like, "Whatever."
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I would kind of joke. Oh, that's what I was going to say earlier. Is yeah, why I think people would always say, why don't the UFOs just land on the White House lawn and they could sort of take care of all this obfuscation? Is there, isn't there, and all this stuff? And I think now because they couldn't handle the rejection, I think nobody would care. I think they would come out and people would be like, whatever. I got bills. Rent's so
Yeah.
expensive. The world's in such a
Right.
weird place. I don't know. Yeah, I think it depends how scary it is too. I think, like you were saying, it might not be just one answer. There's so many. To the two people listening to this, the three people listening will know the phenomenon, as they call it. They say it's like different spokes, same wheel, and they're not sure how, but like ghosts, paranormal, near death experiences, aliens, alien abductions are somehow related, share similar traits. even with like mediums and psychics, it's just like this whole like smorgasbord. Uh, but nobody's really sure how it all fits together, you know. And some of it might be really scary and terrifying. And so maybe that's why in these hearings and stuff and behind the scenes and stuff we don't see, they try to slow walk it, because like cattle mutilations, that's pretty scary, or horse mutilations, that's a big thing in Europe, um, which is just sad and terrifying, you know. Yeah. And abductions and I'm sure you've seen some of the abduction stuff in Brazil in the 80s. There's like the Colares incident.
Mhm.
There's like people
Mhm.
were attacked and burned. And um yeah, I don't know. It's fascinating to me too, because I'm just sorry, dominate conversation, but is the still that government's response is like a species or a society is like there's this huge thing happening, this aspect of reality, and we're just not going to talk about it, and we're going to try to hide it. It seems at least it's ratcheting up into the consciousness that I don't think in the public consciousness that I don't think we could ever go back to the way it was, you know. I don't think they could ever go back to just flat denial. There's like Fravor and some of those pilots gave such minute, detailed. The New York Times did a great podcast, you know, on the Nimitz stuff, where that'll just be historical record forever, you know. Yeah, some of the '50s stuff seemed a little more
Mhm.
slight, you know, and the technology wasn't there.
Yeah,
It's like these
yeah.
grainy videos and all that. I mean, what do you think? Do you think they will ever release it all? Do you think there'll be that moment where the president will ever go on TV and just be like, here it is, or that they'll just keep trying to slow roll it forever or try to just never release it?
Um, I mean, I'm not convinced that they have all of the answers and that they're just keeping it secret. But I do think that, uh, governments are going to government, and part of what they always do is keep some things that they deem highly sensitive out of the public. And so I think that, whatever they think or know that the answers are, they will probably not ever fully come out, except maybe, maybe some of them will get declassified 30 years from now, or society
Yeah.
will collapse and we can all read the classified files or something like that. But
Yeah.
um,
It does seem
I
like
think,
society might
I
collapse.
mean, I think, yeah, what, sorry?
Oh, I just said it does seem like society might collapse. So
Yeah. Yeah, but I think government, that whenever politicians are talking, they're talking to each other and they're talking to us, but they're also trying to project something to people abroad who might be listening. And so it seems always like
yeah,
this delicate dance of like, what do we want these different groups of people to take from this, and what should we put in and what should we leave out? And so I think from those motivations, it's always hard to get a totally straight story about anything,
that's
UFOs
true.
or not. But so I guess final answer, no. I don't think we will get
Yeah.
a true story. Yeah.
I mean, it's this is the most nerdy thing ever, but it got like I mean, it's like the UFO world, so every you know, it's like all of it's probably terrible and fake. But there was this thing on. I don't read 4chan. I hate all of that stuff. You know, it's very sad and whatever. But on it broke on UFO Twitter and on like UFO Reddit, whatever, that there was a guy who went on there and supposedly he's like, I read all the thread and he's like, I work for the government and it's the whole thing. I have cancer, I'm dying, and I'm going to tell you all the things I know, whatever. And was explain. He told this whole story that was fascinating about like he was like he's like what it really is. He's like there's the Nimitz thing and Fravor, and they saw that giant thing under the water, and then the two little tic tacs sort of took their eye off it, and then that thing disappeared. He was like, that's like this mobile construction unit, and it flies around the world and sort of spits out the tic tacs and then recycles them, and they're mostly drones. And was telling like it was really, I was like, this would make the coolest movie of all time. It got like a
Uh-huh.
zillion views. It was fascinating, but yeah, it's just so tough because there is no information. Like I love Blink 182, but it's so weird that like I have to go to his Instagram page to look for like UFO news, you know. I'm like, come on, government, like
Right. Right. Who would have thought? Yeah, I remember a few years before 2017 when Tom DeLonge kind of about UFOs, and I read some like Rolling Stone article about how he thought he was going to be the one to, disclose the ultimate truth. And I'm like, that guy, where'd he come from? I've learned
Yeah, it's
listening to
so
them
random.
since I was a teenager and did not know that's what was up. But mhm.
Yeah, it was like, was Green Day unavailable? Like, it's just um
Right.
so
Uh-huh.
random. Yeah, they're great music. Yeah, I would always do like I went to in college, I went to school here in LA, and I would always do every essay I would somehow make it about UFOs or aliens. And I would just be like listening to Blink 182 and typing it. And yeah, I never would have thought, but it's so weird. It's not like NASA, it's not like the space shuttle. They're like, oh, you have to go to whoever, to get the celebrity to get the news on it. It's just like a normal government thing, I don't know.
Mhm.
UFO
Mhm.
stuff's just weird.
Speaking of, are you hopeful for what the NASA UAP panel might put out later, or do you think
You,
that they won't come up with much?
I don't know. I'm fascinated by it. The new director, whose name is escaping me, but is a Biden guy, and he's like a former astronaut, has been pretty vocal about stuff, saying, "Oh, I think there could be stuff out there." NASA's really taking this seriously. Stuff that, yeah, like you were saying, it seems like a little bit different from the '50s. It's a little more declarative or definitive in some of their statements. But I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. It's same with like that during the balloon stuff. I don't know if you remember, the Biden White House announced they were going to do like their own UAP panel, exploratory
Mhm.
thing committee based in the White House. And I interviewed Danny Silva like a week or two ago. And he said he heard in DC that was like a big deal and they were actually like doing stuff. So yeah, I don't know. What do you think? Do you think they'll do
Um,
stuff? I mean,
yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence. They actually don't have very much money, unlike, the military side where they say they don't have a lot, but it's millions of dollars.
yeah,
But I
true.
think what might be useful about it, as I understand what they're going to do at least, is like take a look at all the data that NASA has gathered over the years and see what within it might be useful for looking for anomalies and then how you might go about doing that. And to me, that seems like one of the most valuable things you could do is just try to get a baseline for like how often weird things show up and what like if they group into categories or things like that. So I think it could be useful if they actually do it. So, but
Yeah.
I'm not holding
I
my
mean,
breath for huge results.
do you remember that guy, Gary McKinnon? Did you ever hear of him? That hacker? He was like the '90s who said he hacked into NASA and he saw these UFO pictures, and the US kept trying to extradite him from the UK and they eventually lost. And I don't know if you
Oh
saw
no,
that.
I don't think I know him. I'd have to look that
Oh,
up.
you got to check it out. Yeah, he was like in the '90s, right when the internet was becoming big, and he would just like randomly troll and ping for open ports at NASA. And he got
Oh my
into
God.
Space Johnson or like somewhere big, and he said he saw just a bunch of UFO stuff, and it was fascinating. He said he saw ship logs for off-world ships, but that were like Navy or stuff that just shouldn't exist or whatever. And then he got kicked off, and then this was all real. It was during the George W. Bush administration. The kid lived in the UK, and they were trying to extradite him to serve time here. And it
Wow.
was fascinating. They fought tooth and nail the kid, obviously, and the UK government was interesting. They blocked it eventually, but it went on for years. But I always just
Oh.
wondered, is it true? Like they really went after him. He found something. He saw something. Um, and so yeah, I always wonder when they say in some of these hearings, like, oh, classified stuff, and we can talk about that classified hearing. I'm always like, I want to know what do you guys know? You were saying some of the stuff, maybe it's too spooky to release to the public. In your research, your findings, did you ever find stuff that was very scary that you could see like, oh, this, like if I was the government, I would not let this get out.
Um, there were not any particular stories that well, that's not true. One that's always stuck with me was one that obviously it is public because I know about it now, but it was one I'm sure you're familiar with John Greenwald from the Black Vault.
Yes, he's awesome.
Do you know him?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't know
he
him
said
personally.
his
I just read his stuff.
yeah, he's a good guy. He was telling me about, I think it was his first Freedom of Information Act request that he ever did was about a UFO over Iran, I believe it was.
Yeah.
That, fighter jets went after it, got disabled. There was like a mothership and a smaller ship, and just like multiple people seeing it, people in the military going after it, and then also, became public enough that it became part of Air Force pilot manuals. Like, hey, if you're a guy up there flying a plane, you might see some
Wow.
weird stuff like this thing we saw in 1976. And so, I don't know, things like that. It's not necessarily any spookier than anything else, but something where like multiple people saw the same thing, seemed to interact with it in some physical way, and then other people took it seriously enough to use it as an example. That kind of thing
Yeah,
has always stuck with me. Yeah,
that's really cool. Yeah, there's supposedly
yeah.
too in an old FEMA manual for like firefighters. It's like if a flying saucer crashes, stay away and do
Oh, really?
this. And yeah. Yeah,
Oh
it's
no.
fascinating. Yeah, I wish I could. If I was president, that would be just. I mean, obviously, I guess any of us would be. The first thing I would do, I would just be like, take me to Area 51, show me all the files, show me everything. Are you? Oh,
have
and then,
have
oh,
you
sorry.
oh, I was gonna ask if you've gone out to Area 51 since you're out in
Yes,
California. It's not that far away.
yes,
Good.
I did before it was cool. Me and my buddy, you might be listening to that. One of the few listeners of this, Nick, would I'd known him since I was like 5 years old in Oregon. We grew up together, and then went to college here in LA together. But as our like last, as roommates, as our like last senior trip, we went camping there for like 3 days,
Nice.
and it was so cool. This was like 99, 2000. Um, before terrorism stuff was huge, it was just a different time. Like on the way there, we were driving because we went to school here in LA. We're just like driving down the freeway. And we passed some sign that says like Deep Space Command or something, yada yada Air Force Base. We're just driving this old
Uh-huh.
truck, and we're just like, let's go there. Just no security, no anything. We just drove onto the base, and they wave at us. Then we just drive right up to it. We're just staring at like it looked like the movie Contact. It's just like giant dish. This guy comes out. It's like, what are you doing here? And we're like looking for UFOs. He's like, what? And he's like, no, leave. You can't just be here. And we just drove to Area 51, went camping there. Yeah, didn't see anything except for just those sad security guys in like those white Jeep Cherokees who just must be
Mhm.
so hot during the day. I don't know if you've been out there. Um,
Yeah, yeah, I have. Yeah.
I thought it was
But
great though. It's
when
fun.
after it was cool, so a little more security. You went there in the good old days. I went there in the bad new days where
Yeah, like
there's more
one of the
stuff going
booths
on.
we went to was just empty. Like there was nobody in the like security thing. It was just like, hello, is anyone here? Nobody. We didn't have the guts to like walk in. It was funny too, because at the time, I can hear my voice, guys. I sound like such a surfer. I sound like Spicoli. At the time, Tom Green was big. He's like that. I don't know if you know, like that
Hmm.
comedian, whatever, on MTV. Then I kept telling my
Yeah.
friend, I was like, because we had to get back because he was gonna like fly back home, back east or whatever with his girl or whatever. And I was like, if you see Tom Green, tell him to come here. You got to tell him to come here. You can make like such a funny bit, such a funny show. And he's like, I'm not going to see Tom Green just in New York. And I was like, well, if you do, you could tell him, this would be a funny thing. He would have the guts to, because there's no fence, or at the time we were there was no fence. There's like a line in the
Right.
sand. And he's like, yeah, whatever. And then they go to the airport, and Tom Green walks by him, and he's like, oh, he's like, this is gonna sound so weird. I was just at Area 51. He said Tom Green was just looking at him like a crazy person. I was like, oh, cool, yeah,
Oh
definitely.
man.
Yeah, but
Tom Green probably still tells a story about him, so I think he
he
won there.
he did do a Roswell episode after that. So we always wondered. It was like, was that us? Was that our
That's funny.
was that our inspiration? Gonna get audited by the IRS now. Below their secrets, Bob Lazar. We're almost out of time here on our Zoom record call. This is as long as it will record. Eventually, once I get to like 8 monthly listeners, I'll get some sort of fancy software that can do 5 hour Lex Friedman
That was
interviews. But Sarah,
Yes.
thank you so
You were.
much. This was such an honor. Like you're so
You were.
much. This was such an honor. Like you're so well regarded. You're like Grant Cameron, Diana Pasolka. I'm totally blanking on his Jack Valet. Like you're just, yeah, you're in like that A-list upper echelon of such well-respected people. So thank you. This was a huge deal for me. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me on. I don't know if I am in the upper echelon, but I'm always happy to talk about this stuff. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, totally. Sometime we'll hang out at Area 51 if there's ever like a big disclosure party.
Oh man, yeah, for sure, definitely. We can have the party tent there at the camping
Yeah,
spot. I've been meaning to go back. It's about time. It's been a couple years since I've been there, so it's time for me to head back soon.
I love it out there. I always think when I get like old and can just retire on Social Security, I'm going to get an RV and just live out there. It's like the moon. It's like,
Mhm.
we'll have the best day ever. I hope you see a UFO today. And yeah,
I hope you do too. Fingers crossed for both of us. Same.
right on. Have a great day, Sarah. And thank you again. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Good luck out there.
Okay, cool. You too.
Thanks.
Bye bye.